Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are here today to start a new book that we'll be reading on since we finished up Eat, Shoots, and Leaves in last Tuesday. But today we start reading the book Southern Horrors and Other Writings. The Anti-Lynching Campaign of Ida B. Wells, 1892 to 1900. Now, this book isn't very big, so we should finish it rather quickly. Yeah, just over 200 pages. 208 looks like the main bulk of everything, and then 212 if we want to add the chronology to it. But anyway, with that said and done, yay, dropping bookmark. Let's go ahead and hop into this. The Foreword. The Bedford series in history and culture is designed so that readers can study the past as historians do. The historian's first task is finding the evidence. Documents, letters, memoirs, interviews, pictures, movies, novels, or poems can provide facts and clues. Then the historian questions and compares the sources. There is more to do than in a courtroom, for hearsay evidence is welcome, and the historian is usually looking for answers beyond act and motive. Different events or different views of an event may be important as a single verdict. How the story is told may yield as much information as what it says. Along the way, the historian seeks help from other historians and perhaps from specialists in other disciplines. Finally, it is time to write to decide on an interpretation and how to arrange the evidence for readers. Each book in this series contains an important historical document or group of documents, each document a witness from the past and open to interpretation in different ways. The documents are combined with some element of historical narrative and introduction for a biographical essay, for example, that provides students with an analysis of the primary source material and important background information about the world in which it was produced. Each book in the series focuses on a specific topic and specific historical period. Each provides a basis for lively thought and discussions about several aspects of the topic and the historian's role. Each is short enough and inexpensive enough to be a reasonable one-week assignment in a college course. Whether as classroom or personal reading, each book in the series provides first-hand experience of the challenge and fun of discovering, recreating, and interpreting the past. Natalie Zeman Davis, Ernest R. May, David W. Blight. The Preface. Ida B. Wells was an African American who achieved national and international fame as a journalist, public speaker, and community activist. This volume collects the 3 pamphlets that constitute her major works during the anti-lynching movement: Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases, A Red Record, and Mob Rule in New Orleans. In introducing these documents, I have sought to contextualize mob violence in general and lynching in particular as a strange, though not really mysterious, fruit of American culture. I look closely at Wells' campaign in light of the Wanima Lubiano Calls cover stories. In this case, master narratives of mob violence that have embedded themselves within them myths and realities. Lubiano reminds us that there are things that we say, things that we do not say, things that we subvert, and things that our subversions conceal. My task has been to define lynching in the company of other acts of mob violence as a multi-layered aspect of American history with dimensions related to political and economic power as well as to race and gender control. Wells disassembled and targeted separately the many contradictions and hypocrisies built into the broad myths that white Southerners had used to justify lynching, making a case for justice at a particular moment in time. Through the pamphlets, we can recognize lynchings as more than isolated incidents arbitrarily happening to African Americans and occasionally to Americans of other ethnic groups. We see instead lynching's complex relationships to the systems of power and domination, to public discourse, and to social activism, including the activism of African American women. As complements to each other, Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases, and A Red Record clearly state Wells' position on lynching, revealing the insight and perception with which she was able to launch the most successful of the early anti-lynching campaigns. Wells' courageous analysis helps us to understand the told and untold story of this sinister thread in the fabric of American life. The third pamphlet, Mob Rule in New Orleans, is a case study that dramatically details an individual incident as it escalates in the absence of law, order, and the application of justice to become yet another striking example of Southern horror. I have also sought to establish an appropriate framework for understanding the personal achievements of Ida B. Wells. Born into slavery, Wells went on to garner a place of respect as a nationally and internationally prominent journalist and as a leader of the Black Club women's movement. Wells was among a relatively small but growing number of public women in an era when public arenas were not considered the place for women. Going against this grain, Wells earned a reputation as an outspoken and steadfast crusader for justice, and the three pamphlets presented here are testimony to her achievement. Fundamentally, therefore, this collection is an occasion to look at Wells, her work, and her accomplishments so that we might more carefully consider the complex of issues and actions that converge in making lynching such a disquieting phenomenon. Southern Horrors and Other Writings, the Anti-Lynching Campaign of Ida B. Wells, 1892 to 1900 is a gateway to much needed dialogue on lynching as an American experience. A note on the pamphlets. Please note that this volume preserves the spelling and punctuation of the original documents, including errors. When an error makes meaning unclear, I've explained it in my annotations, noting, for example, when words and phrases are out of order, rather than correct obvious mistakes or impose contemporary writing conventions. In the interest of preserving historical accuracy, we have printed the documents in this collection as they originally appeared. Acknowledgements. My acknowledgements begin with the expression of gratitude to Charles Christensen and Joan Feinberg, who first suggested this project to me. I am grateful that they saw connections between my research and the possibility of this volume, and that their encouragement continued to be so gracious and forthcoming throughout the project. I also owe a special debt of gratitude to Louise Townsend, the Bedford Development editor, who was so thoughtful in helping me to work through how this volume might be, to the Bedford advertising staff for providing a visual image of Wells in her campaign that haunts me still, to the copy editor, Barbara Sutton, and to a remarkable collective of either Bedford staff members, including managing editor Elizabeth Schaff, assistant production editor Karen Bart, and assistants Charisse Keno and Ellen Thibault, or Tabal. I'm not sure how that last name's pronounced, for the support and assistance that they provided in bringing this book to its completion. In addition, I want to thank Dolores Straker and Andrea Lunsford, whose comments on the earliest draft of Part 1 were very useful. Darlene Clark Hine, Clarence E. Walker, and Paula Giddings for their insight, advice, and counsel on lynching and on the era during which the pamphlets were written. Diana Lacatinier and Anthony M. Toussaint at the Schomburg Research Center, and their assistance in locating documents and photographs that helped to bring Ida B. Wells and her time to life. And James Cameron, founder and director of the Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, whose story of survival and whose dedication to the historical documentation of this injustice has been so inspirational. As always, I am grateful to my family, Pat, Rebecca, and Giles, without whose love and support nothing seems possible or worthwhile. Jacqueline Jones Royster. Now, let's go ahead and hop back to this chronology, 1862 to 1931. 1862. Ida Bell Wells is born in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16, 1862, to James Wells, a carpenter, and Elizabeth Warrington Wells, a cook. Wells is the eldest of 8 children, 4 females and 4 males, 2 of whom die in early childhood. Mary Jane Patterson becomes the first African-American woman to receive a Bachelor of Arts degree from established college, Oberlin College, in Ohio. 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signs the Proclamation of Amnesty and the Reconstruction and the Emancipation Proclamation. The Port Royal Commission establishes the first official school for freed slaves in the South on St. Helena Island off the coast of South Carolina. 1864, Rebecca Lee graduates from the New England Female Medical College and becomes the first African American woman physician in the United States. 1865, the Civil War ends. President Lincoln is assassinated and Andrew Johnson becomes the 17th U.S. President. Congress establishes the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Congress ratifies the 13th Amendment. The Southern states begin adopting black codes. And Vassar College, among the oldest women's college in the U.S., is founded. 1866, the KKK is organized in Pulaski, Tennessee. Fisk and Atlanta universities are founded. The Equal Rights Association, an organization dedicated to advancing the civil rights of African Americans and women, is established, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton as president, Frederick Douglass as vice president, and Susan B. Anthony as secretary. 1867, Congress passes the Reconstruction Acts and military oversight in the southern states begins. 1868, Congress ratifies the 14th Amendment. 1870, Congress ratifies the 15th Amendment. The first African Americans elected to the Senate, Hiram R. Revels from Mississippi, and the House of Representatives, Joseph H. Rainey from South Carolina, begin their terms. All southern states have been readmitted to the Union. Southern states begin establishing white-supported public education, or state-supported public education. 1872, Charlotte E. Ray, an African American, is awarded a law degree from Howard University and becomes one of the first women of any race to be admitted to the bar in Washington, D.C. 1874, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the WCTU, is founded. 1877, control of legislatures in all southern states by Democrats is reestablished. President Rutherford B. Hayes removes the last military troops from the South. Radical Reconstruction ends. 1878, Ida B. Wells becomes the family provider after both of her parents and a younger brother die in a yellow fever epidemic. She leaves Rust College and begins a teaching career. 1880, Wells is invited by her aunt to move to Memphis, Tennessee, where she secures a better teaching position. She participates in social and political activities. 1881, the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary, later Spelman College, the oldest college for women of African descent, is founded. 1884, Wells sues the Chesapeake, Ohio and Southwestern Railroad and wins, but the suit is overturned by the Tennessee Supreme Court. Wells writes her first article for The Living Way about her railroad lawsuit. 1889, Wells becomes co-owner with Reverend Taylor Nightingale and J.L. Fleming of the Free Speech and Headlight. 1890, the National American Women's Suffrage Association unifies the National Women's Suffrage Association and the American Women's Suffrage Association. 1891, Wells writes an editorial against the all-white Memphis Board of Education, loses her teaching job, and becomes a full-time journalist. 1892, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Will Stewart are lynched on March the 9th, 1892. Wells publishes her 8 Men Lynched editorial in the Free Speech on May 21st, 1892, and forced into exile from the South by terrorist threats, Wells accepts a position as a reporter for the New York Age. The year marks the first peak of mob violence against African Americans. At the invitation of club women from New York and Brooklyn, Wells begins a career as a public speaker. She addresses 250 African American women from 3 states on October 5th, 1892, at Lyric Hall in New York City as a testimonial dinner given in her honor. Wells publishes Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in all its phases, as a pamphlet with $500 raised for her at the testimonial dinner. Anna Julia Cooper, educator and community activist, appeals for the rights, interest, and recognition of African American women in the essay collection A Voice from the South. 1893, Wells makes her first speaking tour of England, Scotland, and Wales. With Frederick Douglass, Ferdinand L. Barnett, and I. Garland Penn, Wells publishes an 81-page pamphlet, The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition. 1894, Wells makes her second speaking tour of England, Scotland, and Wales, sending home articles that are published in the Chicago Inner Ocean, Ida B. Wells, abroad. 1895, Wells publishes A Red Record, her second pamphlet. She marries Ferdinand L. Barnett and begins raising a family. Frederick Douglass dies February 20th, 1895. 1896, the National Association of Colored Women, NACW, is founded. Mary Church Terrell is named its first president. 1900, Wells publishes Mob Rule in New Orleans, her third pamphlet. 1902, Gertrude Bastille Mossil, journalist and activist, publishes the essay collection African American Women and Work. 1909, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, is founded as an interracial organization dedicated to social and legal reform. 1919, this year is the second peak of mob violence against African Americans. 1920, an interracial network of moderate Southern leaders organized the Commission on Interracial Cooperation, which grows in the mid-1920s to become the major interracial reform organization in the South. 1922, Mary Burnett Talbert, the National Association for Colored Women president, from 1916 to 1920, organizes at the request of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the Anti-Lynching Crusaders, a group that draws from a broadly based network of African American women community activists. 1930. This year is the third peak of mob violence against African Americans. Jesse Ames Daniels organizes the Association of Southern Women for the Prevention of Lynching, the first organization of white women against lynching. And 1931. Wells dies on March 25th, 1931. Lynchings of African Americans continue to be reported each year after her death until 1953, when there are none reported for the first time since 1882. After 1953, lynchings continue to be reported. Between 1882 and 1931, according to figures collected by the NAACP, 3,318 African American men, women, and children were lynched at the hands of parties unknown. So, yeah, a lot of information just there in the beginning, especially in that chronology, because we see a lot of not just Wells, but the events going on at the time of her life. So, yeah. Where is it? Okay. In the preface, there is something we have to pay attention. I have to point back to. The author says, I have sought to contextualize mob violence in general and lynching in particular as a strange fruit, as a strange, though not really mysterious, fruit of American culture. This is a reference to the song Strange Fruit, which is about African Americans being lynched. The bodies hanging from trees, swollen. But yeah, it was a song made famous by Billie Holiday. Strange fruit as an image of the lynched bodies of African Americans hanging from southern trees was popularized in both literature and music. Two examples hearing this title are bearing this title are a song made famous by Billie Holiday with words by Lewis Allen and a 1944 novel by Lillian E. Smith. And then I look closely at Wells' campaign in light of what Juanima Lubiano calls cover stories. And Juanima Lubiano, black ladies, welfare queens, and state minstrels, ideological war by narrative means, embracing justice, engendering power. Yeah. So, to dig a little deeper, but yeah, Ida B. Wells clearly writing a number of pamphlets about all she sees, all what's going on. Yeah. Let's see, she was born, 1862, and dies in 1931. Not quite 60. Maybe 59. But yeah. Even in her shortened life, she wrote a lot in a time when women didn't really perform such jobs, writing articles on subjects, especially subjects like lynching. So yeah, Ida B. Wells. But we'll go ahead and end that episode there. This will be an interesting book when we really get into it. But as always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description below the video, in the box below the video, which there is none to cite. I'm just reading straight from the book. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.